Welcome to this session on designing and developing your API-first microservices. My name is Harsh Jagadhisan, and I'm going to take you through how you could build your microservices using SAP Cloud Platform and API management in an API-first approach. I'm going to take you through the different capabilities that we have in the cloud platform and also show you a quick demo. So APIs are the digital building blocks if you have to build new applications, specifically innovate on your digital experience, if you want to integrate, or if you want to engage with your community or with your customers and partners and your overall ecosystem. More and more cloud native applications are built based on microservices, and if you choose an API first approach to build your microservices, it can help you build the microservices in a way that it's easy for your developers, app developers, to go use your APIs and microservices to build apps or integrate or even engage with your ecosystem. Cloud Platform is a comprehensive API platform. So typically when you're talking about APIs or building microservices, you're talking about supporting digital interactions and engagement, digital apps, business networks, partners, and customers who you want to engage with. And your data is sort of spread over a heterogeneous landscape. It's in SAP systems, non-SAP systems, middleware, databases, cloud systems, services. It could be in third-party systems. And you should be able to bring those APIs and you should be able to bring that data and process and provide it for digital interaction. So Cloud Platform has API management, which allows you to manage the full life cycle of your APIs, from design to security to traffic managing your APIs, mediation, caching, to do edge delivery, analytics, reporting, so on and so forth. It's extremely comprehensive. But just API management is half the story, right? You want to go and develop your APIs in a microservices manner. You want to build your microservices and expose those APIs. And Cloud Platform is very comprehensive, and it can help you do that. We address all the different personas, the API product manager, the API developer, the app developers, and we provide a full life cycle to build your microservices. You can choose to design with Open API specification, with OData, with RAML. You could also use any of the languages of your choice, Node.js, Java, Python, and sort of build this in a serverless way and deploy it into the Cloud Foundry part of the cloud platform. And you can actually scale these microservices without having to sweat. So you can simply do a CF push, you can do a CF scale, and your APIs and microservices are out there for your customers and for your apps. You can also use any kind of persistence, Redis, if you're doing some caching, if you're doing document-based store, Mongo, or even HANA as an in-memory data grid to collect all the data and deliver it with microservices and APIs. We also have DevOps capabilities, so if you want to stand up your own CI/CD pipeline, you can do that very easily in Cloud Platform with the comprehensive DevOps capabilities that the platform has. So Cloud Platform is a comprehensive platform if you want to take a cloud native approach to build your microservices, expose them as APIs, and then engage your app developers, your customers, and partners. When you talk about microservices and APIs, looking at the full cycle is important. And the full cycle means we are starting with design, where you're designing the API, you're developing it, you're actually managing it, metering, if needed, monetizing it as API products, and then engaging with your audience. We provide API Designer, which is a way to go and design your APIs in RAML, OData, or an Open API specification. And when you're starting with an API first approach, you start with designing your APIs first. You're able to take these APIs, give it out to your developers, mock the API in a way that you don't have to go and implement the API before. You can actually design the API, mock it, hand it over to your developers, iterate with them so that they're able to use the APIs easily, and then go ahead and implement the APIs. So there are multiple ways to implement APIs. It's a versatile platform. Today we're going to look at how do we implement APIs, the microservices which are supporting the APIs using Cloud Foundry. You can also use integration services to go and integrate into your backend, pull the data out and implement your APIs. You can use persistency. We're going to show how you'll use persistency. In this case, you will use Postgres. In the demo that I'm going to show you, you can also use messaging to decouple your front-facing digital apps from your backend. You can use on-premise middleware, where you have your APIs already, use Cloud Connector, bring it onto the cloud. So it's a versatile platform, but the focus for this session is about how you do API-first microservices. Then you have an API portal, which allows you to do security, traffic management, and mediation, and also create API products, which can be published, and then finally engage with developers through a developer portal, or even through a marketplace like the API Business Hub. The APIs that you build can be consumed in mobile services and native SDKs, as well as in WebIDE to build Fiori apps. So it's a comprehensive platform to do all your API needs. And we're going to look at a scenario-driven API design approach to build your microservices. And this is a 4-step process. And we're going to take a product catalog as an example. And that's the example that we're going to show you. So the first step is planning an initial design, understanding who the API is for, what are they going to use it for, and coming up with using something like an OpenAPI specification to build your API. You can also use OData to do that. You can also use the application programming model using CDS to start with. So there are multiple approaches that you could take. And then you go and generate code where you can go and implement your microservices. And then finally, you're able to deploy it into Cloud Foundry and scale it if need be, bring it under management and API management, add policies if you need, and then really look at analytics of how people are using these APIs. Finally, you can also provide this API to your developers to go and build on top. So let's quickly take a look at the demo. So I'm doing the demo on the trial environment, so you can actually follow along, or you can actually do it after the session. So I have API management service in Cloud Platform, and we have what we call as an API designer. The API designer is allowing you to go and design your APIs. And I can go in. Let me import an API design that I've already done. I will also share some best practices to do API design. I have a product catalog API, and I've used YAML and OpenAPI spec in order to design this API. This is how it looks. It's got a /products. Get one individual product, and you can actually do get products, post products. So that's how the API design sort of looks like. You can go and do your documentation. You can give examples, and so on and so forth. This is a schema of the product. It's got an ID, a name, a description, a price, and an availability. And it's a complex structure with price having product price, currency unit, and availability having amount and which warehouse it's available. So that's how the API design looks like. Okay? And now I can go and generate a server. We support JAX-RS, Node.js, Spring. And in this case, I want to generate a server which is Node.js based. And I'm calling it the product catalog. And I'm generating this into my desktop. And now let me go in. This was the product catalog that got generated. I open it up, and you actually see all the code that's getting generated, the API, the controllers, and the code that's got generated. So I have something already done here, and I'm going to open it up. So that's how the code looks. You have the APIs, you have the controllers, you have a database, and then I have used Postgres. And in Cloud Platform, I can go and turn on Postgres. So I have the service marketplace, and I have different services here. And I've turned on Postgres, and I've created a Postgres instance, which is my persistence for this microservice. So the microservice is going to implement that API that I just designed. So I have a demo DB, a Postgres DB that I've created. What I've done here is use a common node package, which is a SQLize package, and I'm connecting into this Postgres and establishing a DB connection. And I'm building a controller which is actually using this DB connection in order to do certain implementation of the CRUD pattern, right? So parts of it is generated, parts of it is code that I've written in order to make this CRUD work. I can now go in and do a CF push, because I also have the code that's generated is also an MTA file, which is the format that we have, a multi-target app format, which we have to push into Cloud Foundry. And I'm able to push it into Cloud Foundry. When I do the push, the API endpoint is available here. So when I go and look at the endpoint, that's the product catalog API that I just created. And I have the endpoint which I can bring up. So I'm not spinning up any VMs. I'm not doing any kind of infrastructure work. All I did is to write some database code and push it into Cloud Foundry. I have an open endpoint which is available, and I can go look into my APIs. So I have get products and I have post products. Let me actually go and, because I've designed my API with the way that I have an example in the spec, I can go and create this API here. I can go and create a new product. And when I try it out, I'm able to post it into Postgres. And when I get it, I get the product back which I just created. So I have a very simple microservice that's built, which is implementing this product catalog API, and I'm able to push it into Cloud Foundry, and it's available now in Cloud Foundry. What I've done next is I've designed my API, I pushed it into the cloud. I'm able to scale it. I can do a CF scale. I can set up an auto scaler to scale this API endpoint when I have more traffic. And now I want to bring it under management. In the Cloud Foundry environment, we have built a service broker for API management. So I have turned it on, like how I turned on the Postgres service. I've created an instance of API management service broker here. And this was part of my setup step that I did. I created an instance, and I have a service broker of API management that's available here. And now what I could do is take this endpoint that we have here, which is this microservice endpoint, which is implementing that API, and bring it under management in API management. And the way I would do it is through what we call as a service binding. So I can actually bind a root. Here I'm saying, hey, this is my root. The myAPIM is the instance of API management. The host name is product catalog HJ, and I'm binding it to a particular endpoint. And when I run this query, what happens is API proxy, a proxy to that endpoint gets created in API management. And this is API management. I can actually see the API portal. So what I've done, I've designed the API, I've implemented the microservice, which is implementing that API, and now I'm trying to bind it, and I've created an API proxy which has come into API management. So the bind service has created an API proxy automatically, and if I look at it, so this is the API proxy endpoint, and let me actually debug this for you. When I start the debug session, I can go in and try out this API. When I try this API out, the flow of the call is actually hitting the route service, API management. If I put some policies, it can sort of enforce it, and then it goes into my microservice implementation. So you can actually see the call that's actually going into this microservice and sort of track it step by step on what's going on here, right? So I brought this microservice, the API under management and API management, and now I can use all the goodness of API management, like adding policies and managing this microservice. So we have a bunch of security policies in place, traffic management policies, mediation policies, extension policies that are available. And what I want to do in this case is simply do a spike arrest. I already added a spike arrest policy and said, okay, only support 5 requests per second. So API management can start enforcing these requests on that microservice. What it can also do is give you all the rich analytics and developer engagement that API management brings out of the box. So we can actually see how the APIs are performing, how many API calls are coming in, what are the response times, and if something's going down, raise an alert. So that was a quick demo of how we started creating a scenario-based microservice, which was for a product catalog. We defined the API, we generated code, the microservice code, implemented it, pushed it into Cloud Foundry, brought it back into management and API management, and finally made it available for our end users to go and consume this API. At SAP, we also put together a set of enterprise API best practices for your API design, and you can actually go and download this. It's available on our website, and it will give you an idea on how to design high quality enterprise APIs for your APIs. We also use a similar approach as part of the APification of SAP, where we are turning API first. A lot of our services are getting implemented API first. For example, the new services like machine learning are completely based on an API first approach. So what I want to leave you with is, if you want to craft and execute your API strategy, there are multiple ways to build your API. Think about who you're building the APIs for. Think about the business use cases. Think about the ecosystem. Think about having an API program to build an API first mindset, where you can create your own API best practices. And finally, use Cloud Platform as a way to go design your APIs, develop the microservices in a highly resilient way to implement those APIs, bring it under management and API management, and engage with your app developers and audience. We can help you in this journey. We are offering some customer advisory programs. We have API evangelists and coaches. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to help you in this API journey of yours.